A billionaire took a homeless woman to his ex-fiancée's wedding, and what she did shocked everyone. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. She wasn't supposed to be here. The glamorous party, the high society world. She had lost all of this years ago. But tonight, she's walking in, looking like she never left. The people who ruined her are about to realize they made a mistake letting her go. And now, with a powerful billionaire by her side, she's here to settle the score. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. Nathan Caldwell, a self-assured billionaire, held a wedding invitation in his hands. It was from his ex-fiancée, the woman who had left him for someone else without a second thought. And now, she had sent an invitation as if she wanted to rub her happiness in his face. "Is this a joke?" he muttered, tossing the envelope onto the table. His best friend, Ethan Hayes, picked up the invitation and let out a low whistle. "That's cold. Are you going?" Nathan let out a dry laugh. "And show up alone like some kind of loser? No chance. Then take someone. Show her you've moved on." It was a good idea, but taking just anyone wouldn't be enough. He needed to make an impact to leave Madeline wondering. Later that day, as he left his office, he was still considering his options when he noticed a young woman sitting on the sidewalk outside a restaurant. She was unkempt, her clothes worn and faded, but her features were striking. Her long, messy hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes weren't pleading. They were defiant. On impulse, he walked over to her. Hands in his pockets, he looked down at her. "Hey, you need money?" The woman lifted her gaze, but not with gratitude. Her expression was sharp, as if she were evaluating him, deciding whether he was even worth her time. Then a smirk appeared on her lips. "What is this?" she asked. "Some kind of social experiment? You ask, and depending on my answer, you either flip me $1 or walk away." Nathan's eyebrows lifted. No one talked to him like that. "Come with me to an event, and I'll pay you enough to change your life." She let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. "Wow, do you always go for dramatic lines, or just when you want to sound like some kind of savior?" There was pure sarcasm in her voice, and it threw him off more than it should have. But he kept his composure. "You just need to dress up, smile, and come with me." She tilted her head, amusement flickering in her gaze. "Oh, I see. You need a trophy date for the night." Nathan narrowed his eyes. This woman was challenging him on purpose. "If you don't want the offer, I can find someone else." She laughed, loudly this time. "Is this a joke? Because honestly, I don't see a line of candidates waiting around here." He pressed his lips together. How the hell was she turning this around on him? She stood up, dusted off her dress, and stepped closer. Too close. "I'll accept," she said as if she were doing him a favor. "But only because I'm curious." Nathan felt something dangerous in the air. "Curious? Curious about what?" he asked, suspicious. She smiled, her eyes glowing with an unreadable expression. "To see how far a man like you is willing to go." Nathan stood still for a moment. Who the hell was this woman? Juliette settled into the seat of the sleek black Tesla, keeping her gaze fixed on the city lights of San Francisco passing by outside the window. She didn't seem scared, nervous, or even impressed, just observant. Nathan, sitting beside her, realized he was waiting for a reaction. But there was none. No questions, no hesitation, just acceptance. "You don't even want to know where we're going?" he asked, breaking the silence. She turned to him, a smirk playing on her lips. "Someplace expensive, I imagine." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "And you're not curious?" "Should I be?" She tilted her head slightly. "You found me on the street and offered me money to be your date. That's already weird enough. But I doubt you're planning to sell me to a crime syndicate or something." Nathan let out a short laugh. "No, nothing that dramatic. Just a social event. A wedding, right?" He looked at her, narrowing his eyes. "How do you know?" "You have that look," she said, studying him. "A man trying to get revenge on someone." Nathan clenched his jaw. She was reading him like an open book, and he didn't like it. "And if I am?" he asked. She shrugged. Does it matter to me? As long as I get paid. Nathan smirked. He liked her attitude, but he still wanted to understand who this woman was. Someone who accepted things so easily. A few minutes later, the car pulled up in front of an elegant modern building, a well-known luxury salon in San Francisco, Opulence Beauty Lounge. Juliette stepped out without question and followed Nathan inside. The place smelled of high-end beauty products, and a team of stylists rushed over the moment they walked in. I want a full transformation, Nathan ordered. Hair, makeup, wardrobe, everything. The staff nodded, and within seconds, Juliette was seated in a plush styling chair. If you want to change your mind, now's the time, she said as a stylist began untangling her hair. Change my mind about what? Me. I guess I expected you to pick someone more impressionable. Nathan crossed his arms. You're not impressed by anything? Not by this. Juliette closed her eyes as the hairdresser started washing her hair. I've been in this world before. Nathan frowned. But before he could ask anything, a stylist gently pushed him toward the lounge area. Mr. Caldwell, please relax and let us work, the woman said politely. Nathan glanced at Juliette one last time before leaving. He was intrigued. The hours dragged on. When a stylist finally called his name, Nathan stood up and walked back into the salon. When he saw her, he froze. The woman standing before him wasn't the same woman he had met on the street. Her once messy waves were now sleek, shining locks cascading down her back. Her face, previously shadowed by exhaustion, was now flawless, her hazel eyes framed by perfectly applied makeup. The dark emerald gown hugged her figure in all the right ways, and the delicate heels elongated her legs, making her look even more poised. But what stunned him the most was her expression. She didn't seem shocked or impressed by her transformation. She simply looked at herself in the mirror, studying her reflection with familiarity, like she had seen herself like this before. Nathan narrowed his eyes. What is it? She asked, catching his gaze in the mirror. You don't look surprised. Juliette turned, a knowing glint in her eyes. Because I'm not. Nathan crossed his arms. Who are you, Juliette? She grabbed the clutch purse the stylist handed her and walked toward him. Someone who knows how to seize an opportunity when it comes. The sleek black Tesla glided down the illuminated streets of San Francisco, heading toward the event Nathan had been dreading, but now felt strangely eager to attend. Beside him, Juliette studied the passing city lights with a calmness that irritated him. He had expected her to show some sign of nervousness or hesitation. But since leaving the salon, her composure had remained flawless, as if she was already used to this world. You're very quiet, Nathan commented, briefly glancing at her. I'm just enjoying the silence, Juliette replied with a faint smile. He frowned. Most people in your situation would be overwhelmed by all this. She let out a soft laugh. Maybe I'm not like most people. Nathan realized that pressing her for answers wouldn't work. She was playing her own game and he had no choice but to watch. The car finally pulled up in front of the Ashford Grand Ballroom, an elite banquet hall overlooking the bay, where San Francisco's wealthiest figures had already gathered for the event. Couples stepped out of luxury sedans and limousines, showing off their designer attire and expensive jewelry. Photographers and journalists hovered around the entrance, capturing every detail for the society pages. Nathan exited first, adjusting his suit. Then he extended his hand to Juliette. She accepted it without hesitation. But when she stepped out of the car, the effect was immediate. All eyes turned toward them. Women whispered behind their hands, speculating about the mysterious woman at Nathan Caldwell's side. Men stole curious glances. Juliette, however, did not flinch. With impeccable grace, she lifted her chin and smiled slightly, as if she were already used to being the center of attention. Nathan led her down the red carpet toward the entrance. As they walked, Juliette's expression remained serene, completely unfazed by the extravagance surrounding her. Follow my lead, Nathan murmured. Smile. Be polite. Don't draw too much attention. She raised an eyebrow. Did you bring me here to make your ex jealous or to be invisible? Nathan pressed his lips together, refusing to answer. That's what I thought, Juliette said, amused. They stepped through the massive golden double doors and entered the grand ballroom, where sparkling chandeliers reflected warm light across the marble floor. The room was filled with San Francisco's wealthiest and most powerful. It didn't take long for Madeline Harrington and her fiancé to come into Nathan's line of sight. She looked breathtaking. Of course she did. Wearing an elegant white gown, every detail of her appearance carefully curated. Beside her stood James Alden, her future husband, a polished, old-money businessman with just enough charm to pass as interesting. Exactly the kind of safe, family-approved choice Nathan had expected. Madeline's eyes met his for a brief moment, flickering with surprise. But when she noticed Juliette standing next to him, she froze. Her expression changed ever so slightly, a flicker of curiosity and discomfort crossing her face, as if she were trying to place Juliette to figure out who she was. Nathan smirked. Exactly the reaction he wanted. With calculated confidence, he led Juliette straight toward them. "Madeline," he greeted, his voice polite but cold. She blinked a few times before forcing a smile. "Nathan, what a surprise. I didn't expect you to come." "Of course I came," he said smoothly, glancing at Juliette. "And I brought company." Madeline's gaze swept over Juliette, evaluating her from head to toe. "We haven't been introduced," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "You are?" Before Nathan could respond, Juliette extended her hand effortlessly. "Juliette," she said, her voice even refined. "A pleasure to meet you." Her posture was flawless, her smile calm, unwavering. Madeline hesitated for just a moment before shaking her hand. "You look familiar," she noted, narrowing her eyes slightly. Juliette tilted her head slightly, a flicker of amusement playing in her gaze. "Do I?" Madeline forced another polite smile, but Nathan caught the tension in her expression. She was uneasy. "Good." James cleared his throat, trying to ease the awkward tension. "Shall we toast?" He lifted his champagne glass. Nathan nodded, but before he could turn, Juliette spoke first. Her voice was warm, polite but deliberate. "I hope you'll be very happy," she said, taking a sip of champagne. "Marriage is a serious commitment. I was once engaged myself." Nathan froze. Madeline and James exchanged glances. "Really?" Madeline asked, her voice controlled but slightly too casual. Juliette nodded. "But it didn't work out. My fiancé decided I wasn't the right choice for his family." Nathan felt a sudden chill in the air. Her words weren't random, and Madeline caught the meaning instantly. His ex-fiancée's expression tightened just slightly, her fingers curling around the stem of her champagne glass. "That's an interesting coincidence," Madeline said smoothly. Juliette smiled. "I think so too." A brief, heavy silence settled between them. Nathan could tell Madeline was struggling to maintain her composure. Finally, Juliette gently touched Nathan's arm. "Would you like to dance?" He blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Dance?" "Yes." She arched an eyebrow. "Or would you rather stay here and watch your ex-fiancée try to figure out where she knows me from?" Nathan let out a quiet chuckle. He liked the game she was playing. "Let's dance." As they stepped away, Nathan caught the way Madeline's fingers clenched around her glass. Perfect. The orchestra's melody drifted through the ballroom as Nathan and Juliette moved across the polished marble dance floor. He led her effortlessly, his hand firm at her waist. Juliette's movements were seamless, her posture perfect. "You did that on purpose," Nathan murmured, watching her intently. She smiled. "Didn't I tell you? I've been in this world before." Nathan felt a mix of irritation and admiration. Juliette wasn't just a random woman from the street. She knew exactly what she was doing. His grip on her waist tightened slightly. "You keep surprising me," he admitted. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Juliette asked, tilting her head slightly. "I haven't decided yet." She laughed softly, her hazel eyes gleaming with mischief. "I think you've already figured out that I'm not exactly what I seem." "I've figured out that you know a lot more than you should." Juliette gave him a knowing look. "Let's just say I've been around these people before." Nathan narrowed his eyes slightly. He wanted answers. But before he could push further, a group of well-dressed men approached them, champagne glasses in hand. Businessmen, investors, men Nathan knew well. "Caldwell," one of them said, shaking his hand. "You finally decided to make an appearance." Nathan returned the handshake. "I thought it would be interesting to celebrate the couple," he said coolly. Their attention quickly shifted to Juliette. "And who is your lovely companion?" Before Nathan could answer, Juliette stepped forward gracefully and extended her hand. "Juliette," she said effortlessly. "A pleasure to meet you." Her tone was smooth, confident. She didn't hesitate. Nathan watched with growing curiosity as the men immediately accepted her presence without question. "Juliette," one of them repeated thoughtfully. "Your face looks familiar." Juliette smiled subtly, keeping the mystery alive. "Perhaps we've crossed paths before." The businessman nodded, considering it but not pressing further. Nathan frowned slightly. She was blending in too easily. "And what do you do, Juliette?" another man asked. She picked up a fresh champagne glass from a passing waiter, swirling the golden liquid slowly. "I have an interest in financial markets," she said smoothly. "The rise in tech investments has been particularly fascinating, especially startups focused on artificial intelligence." A brief silence fell over the group. Nathan nearly laughed at their surprised expressions. None of them had expected such an articulate response. "That's a rather specific topic," one of the men finally remarked. Juliette took a sip of her drink, unfazed. "I just follow trends," she said, shrugging lightly. "After all, everything comes down to who gets the right information first. Doesn't it?" The businessman chuckled, now more at ease. Juliette had captured their interest. Nathan, however, felt something entirely different, a growing frustration. She wasn't just fitting in. She was taking over the room. Before he could intervene, a tall, distinguished man approached. Landon Mercer, one of the most influential investors in San Francisco, known for his sharp instincts and ability to see right through people. "Juliette," Landon said, his voice calm but weighted with curiosity. "You seem very comfortable here." She turned to him with a polite smile. "Maybe because I am." Landon laughed. "I like that." His sharp gaze shifted to Nathan. "And what's your relationship with Caldwell?" Juliette shot Nathan a playful glance before answering. "Just an interesting partnership." Nathan's jaw clenched slightly. She was playing her own game, and he didn't like losing control. "Indeed," Nathan interjected smoothly. He reached out, taking Juliette's champagne glass and placing it on a passing waiter's tray. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to steal my companion for a moment." He grabbed her wrist gently, leading her away toward a quieter part of the ballroom. When they were alone, he turned to face her, his voice low and sharp. "What exactly are you doing?" Juliette smiled. "Just having fun." "You're standing out too much." "Wasn't that the point?" she asked, amused. Nathan narrowed his eyes. "You play very well, Juliette." She tilted her head slightly, her smile not fading. "And you don't like it when you're not the one controlling the game, do you?" Nathan let out a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You're not just some random woman I found on the street." Juliette crossed her arms, watching him closely. "And it took you this long to figure that out?" Before Nathan could respond, a soft voice interrupted them. "I hope you're enjoying the party," Madeline said smoothly, stepping up beside them. Her tone was polite, but her eyes were entirely focused on Juliette. Juliette smiled lightly. "Very much," she replied before Nathan could speak. Madeline's expression barely flickered. "You know," she said slowly, tilting her head. "I feel like we've met before." Juliette shrugged lightly. "Maybe. San Francisco's social circles are smaller than they seem." Nathan noticed the way Madeline pressed her lips together. "And where do you know Nathan from?" Madeline asked, voice too casual. Juliette smiled, sipping her champagne. I think it's more fun if that stays a mystery. Madeline let out a soft, calculated laugh. Of course, mystery always adds an interesting touch to stories. She turned to Nathan. Can we talk for a moment? Nathan hesitated, casting a quick glance at Juliette. She simply smiled, as if she already knew exactly what was coming. Of course, he said, nodding. As he followed Madeline out onto a private balcony, the cool San Francisco night breeze hit him. Beyond the ballroom, the city stretched out in glittering lights, but Nathan had no interest in the view. Madeline crossed her arms over her impeccably tailored gown, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes burned with curiosity. Who is she, Nathan? She asked, her tone direct. He kept his face unreadable. Juliette, he replied simply. My companion for the evening. Madeline let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Don't treat me like a fool, she said. I know the kind of women you bring to events like this, and she doesn't fit the mold. Nathan felt a flicker of irritation. What exactly are you trying to say? Madeline stared at him for a long moment. Where did you find her? He hesitated for half a second. And that was enough. Madeline's lips curved slightly, as if she had just confirmed a suspicion. My God, she whispered, almost amused. You found this woman on the street, didn't you? Nathan didn't answer, but his silence spoke for itself. This is unbelievable, Madeline said with a breathless laugh. You brought a... She caught herself just before finishing the sentence. Nathan's jaw clenched. Careful, Madeline. She smirked, unfazed. You brought a nobody to my wedding just to get back at me. He took a slow step forward, closing the space between them. I brought a smart, confident woman who fits in here effortlessly, he corrected. A woman who, apparently, knows a little too much for someone who was supposedly homeless. Madeline's eyes narrowed slightly. She doesn't belong in this world. Or does she? Nathan countered. Madeline's shoulders straightened, her entire demeanor shifting. You can pretend this is all a clever little game, Nathan, she said smoothly. But I have the right to know who I'm dealing with. Nathan scoffed, shaking his head. You lost the right to demand anything from me a long time ago. She tilted her chin up, her expression sharpening. If I were you, Nathan, she said slowly, I'd be careful. That woman didn't just show up in your life by chance. Without waiting for his response, she turned and walked back inside, leaving Nathan alone with his thoughts. Juliette felt the weight of the stairs as she moved through the crowd of San Francisco's elite. It was inevitable. Since she had arrived, people had been trying to place her, trying to figure out where she belonged. But she moved with effortless ease, as if she had always been part of this world. Then, just as she reached for another glass of champagne, a familiar figure appeared in front of her. Madeline. You dance well, Madeline commented, her eyes sharp and assessing. Juliette smiled. Thank you. So do you. Madeline tilted her head slightly, studying her. And you speak well. You know how to carry yourself at an event like this. I appreciate the compliment, Juliette said smoothly. It wasn't a compliment, Madeline replied. It was an observation. Juliette remained perfectly poised, though she could feel the tension in Madeline's gaze. You think you know me, she noted. Madeline let out a quiet laugh. I don't think, she said. I know. Juliette's expression didn't falter. Then tell me, Madeline, who do you think I am? Madeline studied her for a long moment before giving a slow, knowing smile. That's what I'm still trying to figure out. She reached for a glass of champagne from a passing waiter's tray. But don't worry, Juliette, she added lightly. I always find out. With that, she disappeared into the crowd, leaving Juliette standing alone. Juliette let out a slow breath. Madeline was starting to suspect something, and that was a problem. In the car, Nathan drove in silence, his mind spinning. Juliette sat beside him, staring out at the bright San Francisco skyline, but she could tell he was tense. You want to ask me something, she said finally. I do, he admitted, but I don't know if you'll answer. She smiled slightly. Depends on the question. Nathan turned the wheel, making a sharp turn onto a quiet road leading toward her hotel. "Who are you, Juliette?" She crossed her legs, her posture relaxed but deliberate. "The woman you chose to make an impression on your ex-fiancé." Nathan gritted his teeth. "No." His voice was low, controlled. "You know too much. You act like someone who's lived in this world before." Juliette stayed quiet. Nathan pulled up in front of the Fairmont Hotel, a 5-star luxury stay overlooking Nob Hill. He turned to face her. "I had you investigated." She didn't even blink. "And what did you find?" she asked calmly. Nathan studied her. "Nothing," he said finally. "You don't exist, Juliette. No records. No recent information. It's as if you erased your own life." She gave a small, almost knowing smile. "Maybe some things need to be erased." Nathan felt a mix of frustration and intrigue. "I don't like mysteries." "Then maybe I'm not the right person for you," she replied smoothly. Before he could say another word, she opened the car door and stepped out, walking toward the hotel entrance without looking back. Nathan sat still for a moment, his grip tightening around the steering wheel. She was hiding something, and he was going to find out what. Juliette locked the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart racing slightly. Madeline was suspicious. Nathan was suspicious. She walked over to the full-length mirror in the luxurious Fairmont Hotel suite and stared at her reflection. The elegant dress, the flawless makeup. For a moment, she looked like someone else. Or maybe she was becoming who she had always been. With a slow breath, she reached into her purse, pulling out a disposable burner phone. She typed a short message. He started investigating. A reply came seconds later. Then it's time for you to decide your next move. Juliette stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it immediately. She knew she couldn't keep this secret for long, and soon, Nathan would find out the truth. Nathan was not a patient man. He liked direct answers, absolute control. But Juliette, she was a puzzle that didn't fit any pattern, and that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. That morning, as he sat in his corner office overlooking the San Francisco Bay, his mind was still on her. Juliette knew things she shouldn't know. She acted like she belonged in high society, yet had no records, didn't exist in any system. It was as if she had erased herself. Nathan picked up his phone and dialed a private number. The line clicked after 2 rings. "I need you to look into someone," Nathan said bluntly. The man on the other end chuckled. "It's been a while, Caldwell. Who's the target?" Nathan hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Juliette," he said. "No last name." The investigator whistled. "That makes things interesting." "I want everything," Nathan continued. "Where she came from, who she really is, and why the hell she's hiding something." There was a short pause. "Give me 48 hours. Nathan hung up and leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers tapping against his desk. If Juliette was playing a game with him, he was about to see her cards. Later that evening, Nathan decided he had waited long enough. He knew she was still staying at the Fairmont, and he wanted answers now. When he arrived, he knocked hard on the door. Took a few seconds, but then the door swung open. Juliette stood there in a simple satin robe, her makeup removed, her hair slightly damp. She looked unbothered. "Nathan," she said smoothly, "to what do I owe this surprise visit?" He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Juliette raised an eyebrow but didn't stop him. Nathan scanned the room. Everything was neatly arranged, too neat. No sign of someone who had been living on the streets. He turned back to face her. "Have you always been this straightforward?" She smirked slightly. "You don't like small talk, so why should I use it?" Nathan exhaled sharply and sat on the couch across from her. "I want to know the truth, Juliette." She crossed her arms. "The truth about what?" "About you. Who you really are." She leaned forward slightly, holding his gaze. "Why does that bother you so much?" His jaw tightened. "Because you came out of nowhere, accepted my offer without hesitation, and act like you already belong in this world. But there are no records of you anywhere." Juliette stayed silent for a moment. And what if I don't want to tell you? Nathan let out a humorless laugh. Then I'll find out on my own. She watched him for a long moment, then let out a slow breath. Fine, Nathan. I'll tell you a little. Nathan leaned forward slightly, waiting. I grew up in a world very similar to yours. Luxury, power, influence. But that world can be cruel, especially when you become an obstacle to the wrong people. Nathan's eyes darkened slightly. Obstacle. Juliette glanced away. My family was influential. My father owned one of the biggest construction firms in the country. But one betrayal made everything fall apart overnight. I lost everything. Nathan frowned. Who betrayed you? Juliette's jaw tightened slightly, but she kept her voice calm. Someone I trusted. Nathan could tell there was more to the story. Why did you erase your life? A small, sad smile touched Juliette's lips. Because sometimes, it's safer to disappear. The silence between them grew heavier. Nathan knew she wasn't telling him everything. But this was the first piece of the puzzle. And now, he asked, what do you plan to do? Juliette stood up slowly, walking to the balcony doors. I'm still deciding. Nathan watched her closely, then stood up as well. You can keep hiding things from me, Juliette, but I will find out the truth. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. Good luck, then. Nathan stared at her for another moment before finally walking out of the hotel room. Juliette let out a slow breath. She had given him just enough. But not everything. Not yet. The next morning, Nathan was in his office when his investigator called. I found something. Nathan sat up, immediately alert. Tell me. You were right. Juliette isn't who she pretends to be. Nathan's grip on his phone tightened. Go on. Her real name is Juliette Dempsey, daughter of Richard Dempsey. Nathan's heart skipped a beat. He knew that name. The construction tycoon? That's the one. But here's where it gets interesting. Richard Dempsey lost everything a few years ago after being accused of embezzlement. And guess who was deeply involved in that scandal? Nathan's breath stilled. Madeline Harrington. Exactly. Nathan didn't say a word. So Juliette hadn't just shown up by coincidence. Seems like she had a very good reason to accept your offer, the investigator added. Nathan's grip tightened around his phone. Send me everything you have. Already on its way. Nathan hung up and turned to look out the massive floor-to-ceiling window. Juliette had a direct connection to Madeline. That changed everything. Later that evening, Nathan sat in his office, his fingers tapping restlessly against his desk. No matter how much he tried to focus on his work, his mind kept circling back to one thing. Juliette Dempsey. She wasn't just a woman he had pulled off the street. She had a direct link to Madeline. And she had known exactly what she was doing from the start. Nathan exhaled sharply and grabbed his car keys. There was only one way to get answers. He needed to see her. 15 minutes later, he stood outside Juliette's hotel suite at the Fairmont. He knocked once, firmly. A few seconds passed before she opened the door. Her expression flickered with the slightest hint of surprise before settling into its usual calm. Nathan, she said smoothly. Did I forget we had plans? Let's talk, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She let out a soft breath but didn't stop him. Nathan walked into the room, scanning everything carefully. Luxury, elegance. There was nothing here that hinted at a woman who had been living on the streets. Juliette closed the door behind him, then turned to face him. You're not exactly the type who announces his arrival, are you? He ignored the comment. Instead, he met her gaze head-on. I know who you are, Juliette. Her expression didn't change. She walked past him to the minibar, poured herself a glass of red wine, and took a slow sip. Then she turned back to him. Do you? Nathan narrowed his eyes. Your real name is Juliette Dempsey. Your father was Richard Dempsey, one of the most powerful construction moguls in the country before he lost everything. She didn't flinch. And you already know the person responsible for that scandal. Nathan took a slow step closer. Madeline. Finally, Juliette let out a small, quiet laugh. You've done your homework, she murmured. Not everything is adding up, though, Nathan continued. If you lost everything, if you've been surviving on the streets, then why the hell do you fit into this world so effortlessly? Juliette swirled the wine in her glass, considering her answer. Then she sighed. Because I wasn't always broke, Nathan, she said simply. I grew up in this world. I knew the people, the rules, the expectations. But when my father's empire collapsed, when my mother got sick, when every door closed on me, her voice lowered slightly. I had no choice but to disappear. Nathan watched her carefully. And now? He asked. She lifted her chin slightly. Now, I'm making sure that Madeline Harrington pays for what she did. Nathan didn't move. He simply stared at her, his sharp mind piecing everything together. That's why you agreed so easily, he said. Juliette smirked. Wouldn't you have done the same? Nathan exhaled, rubbing his jaw. You're playing a dangerous game. I know. She set her wine glass down and walked closer. But here's the thing, Nathan. She met his gaze, unwavering. You don't like Madeline any more than I do. Nathan said nothing, because she was right. Madeline had humiliated him, made him look like a fool, and he wasn't the kind of man to forget that. Juliette took another slow step toward him. So the way I see it, she continued, you and I, we want the same thing. Nathan studied her, his mind calculating. What exactly do you want from me? She tilted her head. Help me, she said simply. Help me bring Madeline down. Nathan let out a low chuckle. You're asking me to take your side in a personal war. Juliette's lips curved into a slight smile. You were already planning to destroy her, she said. I'm just giving you a better reason to do it. Nathan considered that, and to his surprise, he liked it. After a long silence, he finally said, I don't take orders from anyone, Juliette. She raised an eyebrow. Neither do I, she countered. Another pause. Then a slow smirk formed on Nathan's lips. All right, he extended his hand. Let's destroy her together. Juliette didn't hesitate. She took his hand. Deal. And just like that, the game had officially changed. Early the next morning, Nathan's private investigator called. We have a problem, he said. Nathan's eyes darkened instantly. What is it? Madeline already knows Juliette is back. And she's not happy. Nathan's grip on his coffee mug tightened. What is she going to do? We're not sure yet, the investigator admitted. But someone is digging for dirt on Juliette. Nathan's jaw clenched. Keep me updated. When he hung up, a weight settled in his chest. Madeline wouldn't let this go. She would try to destroy Juliette again. And this time, Nathan wasn't sure if Juliette was ready for what was coming. The next morning, Nathan found Juliette sitting on the balcony of her hotel suite, staring at the view of San Francisco Bay. She was sitting on the ground, arms wrapped around her knees, lost in thought. Nathan approached slowly and crouched down beside her. You know she's found out, right? Juliette didn't react right away. I know, Nathan exhaled. She's not going to stop. Juliette finally turned to look at him. Neither will I. Nathan studied her for a moment. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her eyes tired but sharp. Something tightened in his chest. He had seen plenty of strong-willed people in business, but Juliette, she was different. She wasn't just fighting to win. She was fighting to survive. Juliette blinked a few times, as if trying to hold back emotions. But then, unexpectedly, a single tear slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but Nathan had already seen it. And before he could think, he reached forward and pulled her into an embrace. Juliette stiffened for a second. Then slowly, she relaxed against him. It's going to be okay, Nathan murmured. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone in this fight. Nathan had expected Madeline to retaliate, but he hadn't expected her to move this quickly. That afternoon, every major news outlet in San Francisco ran the same sensational headline. Juliette Dempsey, from heiress to scandal. The woman who lost it all and tried to steal it back. The articles painted Juliette as a fraud, claiming she was trying to worm her way back into high society by deceiving powerful men. Madeline had used her influence to twist the story. Nathan sat in his office, his expression dark as he read the fabricated reports. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Juliette walked in, tossing a magazine onto his desk. She let out a half-laugh, shaking her head. She really doesn't waste time, does she? Nathan looked at her carefully. You knew this was coming, didn't you? Juliette exhaled. I've waited years for this moment, Nathan. Did you really think a scandal would scare me? Nathan smirked. That's what I like about you. She raised an eyebrow. That I don't panic? That you don't break. She let out a soft chuckle. You always have that absurd confidence, don't you? Nathan leaned forward, meeting her gaze. Because I never lose. Juliette studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. Good. Because neither do I. The next evening, Juliette received an unexpected invitation. A private dinner at the Harrington Club. Members only. Her presence was requested. She stared at the gold-embossed card in her hand, her jaw tightening slightly. Nathan, sitting on her hotel couch, took the invitation and scoffed. This is obviously a trap. I know. Then you're not going. Juliette gave him a pointed look. Of course I'm going. Nathan pressed his lips together. Juliette. This is my moment, Nathan, she said firmly. I'm not running. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. Then let's make sure Madeline is the only one who loses tonight. The Harrington mansion was filled with San Francisco's elite for the exclusive dinner. Juliette arrived alone, dressed in a black satin gown that exuded power and mystery. Nathan was already inside, blending into the crowd as he watched every detail unfold. Then Madeline appeared. She greeted Juliette with a venomous smile. Glad you accepted my invitation. You didn't give me much choice, Juliette replied smoothly. Madeline tilted her head. I hope you've enjoyed all the attention lately. The media really loves your story. Juliette smiled. I've gotten used to being the center of attention. Madeline's eyes flashed with annoyance before she quickly masked it. You've always wanted that, haven't you? Juliette's lips curved slightly. No, Madeline. I've always wanted justice. For the first time, something in Madeline's expression shifted. Nathan approached them, holding an envelope in his hand. Madeline stiffened. It looks like you didn't read the papers today, he said casually, handing it to her. Madeline opened it. Her face went pale. Inside were undeniable documents, proof of her involvement in the financial scheme that destroyed Juliette's family. Signatures, bank records, secret correspondences. Juliette folded her arms. Game over, Madeline. Madeline's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. This is fake, she whispered. Nathan smirked. No, it's not. And tomorrow morning, it'll be on every front page. Madeline's mask finally cracked. You can't do this to me, she snapped. Juliette tilted her head slightly. Just like you did to me? At that moment, the ballroom doors swung open. 2 police officers stepped inside, followed by a federal prosecutor. Madeline Harrington, one of the officers announced. She froze. Yes, you are under arrest for financial fraud, embezzlement, and market manipulation. The entire room fell silent. Madeline let out a nervous laugh. This is ridiculous. I'm Madeline Harrington. Nathan smirked. And now, you're also a criminal. The officers stepped forward, pulling handcuffs around her wrists. She turned to Nathan desperately. Nathan, say something. He stared at her, completely unmoved. Your only mistake, Madeline, was thinking you'd never get caught. As she was dragged away, her furious gaze landed on Juliette. You think this is over? She spat. Juliette smiled. For you, it is. And just like that, the queen of high society was finished. The next day, Madeline's arrest dominated the headlines. Her entire financial empire collapsed within hours. As investors and allies abandoned her, she was left with nothing. That evening, Juliette and Nathan sat in his penthouse, staring out over the San Francisco skyline. She held a glass of wine but didn't drink it. "You did it," Nathan said. Juliette exhaled. "We did it." He studied her carefully. "And now?" Juliette set her glass down and looked at him. "I start over." Nathan's chest tightened slightly at her words. "I want to help you." She gave him a skeptical look. "How?" He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "This is a proposal for a new business," he said, handing it to her. "A company in your name." Juliette blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "I want to start something for you. A business of your own. Your independence." She studied him for a moment, then smiled softly. "On one condition," she said. Nathan smirked. "What's that?" Juliette stepped closer. "I do it my way." He chuckled. "You always do." And for the first time, Juliette knew that her future was truly hers again. Months passed. Dempsey Consulting was officially launched, a strategic investment and analysis firm under Juliette's leadership. She threw herself into the work, reconnecting with old contacts and building her team from scratch. Nathan stayed by her side the entire time, never overstepping, but always present. Until one evening he realized something. He had helped her rebuild her life, but now he wanted to be part of it. "I'm in love with you." Juliette froze. She turned away from her desk, blinking at Nathan. "What?" "I know it's soon," he admitted, "but I can't pretend anymore." Juliette exhaled slowly. "I can't," she whispered. Nathan's jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "I'm not ready for a relationship, Nathan. I just got my life back, and I need to focus on that." Nathan nodded slowly, though the answer stung more than he expected. "All right." Juliette gave him a small smile. "You always understand." Nathan smirked. "But I'm not a man who gives up easily." In the following months, he made sure she knew that. Every morning, he left a fresh cup of coffee on her desk. "To keep you going," he'd say with a smirk. Then came the dinners. "Is this a date?" she asked one evening. "Just dinner between business partners," he replied casually. And then the small surprises. One night, after a long day, Juliette returned to her office to find a bouquet of white lilies on her desk. With a note, "I know you like coffee more than flowers, but I hope you'll enjoy these anyway." She chuckled softly, shaking her head, but something inside her stirred. One evening, Juliette attended a business gala, where she was introduced to Liam Bissett, a French investor. He was charming, charismatic, with an easy confidence that made people listen. "You dance well, Miss Dempsey," he murmured as they moved across the dance floor. Juliette smiled. "I've learned that a strong presence is essential in business." Liam chuckled. "And outside of business?" Before she could respond, she felt a piercing gaze from across the room. Nathan, watching her. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with jealousy. Nathan crossed the room with determined strides, ignoring the greetings from investors. When he reached them, he stopped beside Juliette, his jaw tight. "Juliette," he said, "may I speak with you?" Liam raised an eyebrow, offering a polite smile. "Mr. Caldwell, correct? I've heard a lot about you." Nathan's expression remained cold. "And I've heard about you." The atmosphere shifted. Liam picked up on the tension immediately. "It seems your friend doesn't like sharing attention," he murmured to Juliette. Before she could respond, Nathan took a step forward. "You've had your dance, Bissett. Now, if you don't mind." Juliette grabbed Nathan's arm firmly. "Excuse me, Liam. I'll be back in a moment." She pulled Nathan toward a quieter hallway, her steps sharp and irritated. When they reached the corridor, she turned to him. "What the hell was that?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I couldn't stand seeing that guy flirting with you. And that gives you the right to act like an idiot? Did you really not notice the way he was looking at you?" Nathan snapped. "If he was interested, that's my business, not yours." Nathan was silent for a moment, his chest rising and falling. "You're right," he finally admitted. "But I hate the idea of seeing you with another man." Juliette let out a breath. I'm not yours, Nathan, she said quietly. You have no right to be jealous. She turned to leave, but Nathan grabbed her wrist, spun her around, and kissed her. A desperate, fierce kiss filled with anger, frustration, and something else. Something neither of them could deny anymore. For a single second, Juliette kissed him back. Then reality hit. She pushed him away, her breathing unsteady. You can't do that. Nathan's eyes were dark, his breath uneven. I know you felt it. Juliette turned and walked away. She didn't look back. Nathan let her go. But something in him told him he wouldn't have to wait much longer. The next evening, Juliette left work late. As she approached her car, she noticed something wrong. The window had been scratched. A word etched crudely into the glass. Beware. Her blood ran cold. Then, a message popped up on her phone. Alone, you won't get anywhere. Know when to quit. She stared at it for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she hesitated. She reached for her phone and called Nathan. He answered on the second ring. What happened? Someone vandalized my car. His voice was sharp. Are you okay? Yeah, but I just got a threat. Nathan was silent for a second. Then his voice came out low and firm. I'm on my way. 15 minutes later, Nathan pulled up beside her car. He studied the scratches on the window, his expression darkening. You know you can't ignore this, right? Juliette crossed her arms. I know. Nathan pulled out his phone and dialed one of his private security contacts. I need footage from the cameras in this area. Find out who did this. Now. Juliette watched him, noticing something. He wasn't just protecting her. He was furious that someone had dared to threaten her. And for the first time, she felt relief that he was here. Months passed. Juliette's company grew. But so did something else. Something she had fought to ignore for far too long. One evening, after another long workday, Nathan entered her office. It's been 3 months since you launched Dempsey Consulting, he said, tossing a small box onto her desk. She picked it up and opened it. Inside was a silver keychain with the letter J engraved on it. To celebrate, Nathan said. Juliette smiled softly. Thank you. Nathan watched her closely. Will you ever stop running from me? Her heart pounded. She knew the answer, but she wasn't ready to say it. Nathan saw the hesitation in her eyes and smirked. It's okay, he said, stepping back. Like I said, I'm patient. He left the office, and for the first time, Juliette realized something. She didn't want to run anymore.